Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report, War, Peace, and the Presidency, Breaking with Convention. I'm Amy Goodman. In Gaza, Israeli forces have killed at least 42 people in airstrikes on a UN-run school in Nuseirat and on a so-called safe area in Al-Mawasi near Khan Yunis. The Nuseirat attack, which killed at least 23 Palestinians, is the sixth time Israel bombed an UNRWA school in the past 10 days. This is a survivor.
Where is the safety for the agency UNRWA schools? There are no more safe agency UNRWA schools, nor safe clinics, no more safe houses, no safe streets. We have been left desolate, displaced, and destroyed. And here we are. What have the children done to deserve this? Where are the countries? Where are the people? Where is the world? What do we do with the wrath of mothers, children? What is their sin? What have they done?
UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees, reports 70% of its schools in Gaza have now been bombed, and over 500 people who'd taken shelter in them have been killed by Israel since October 7th. Separately, UNRWA projected it will take 15 years to clear the rubble from Israel's destruction of Gaza. The Center for Constitutional Rights has filed a Freedom of Information Act request to access communications of the Biden administration related to the International Criminal Court's investigation into Israeli war crimes in Gaza. The group says it's focused on efforts by the U.S. and U.K. to block the ICC from delivering arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Lebanese state media reports Israeli air attacks in southern Lebanon have killed at least 5 Syrian civilians, including 3 children. Israeli military and Hezbollah have been trading near daily fire across the border since Israel's war on Gaza began. In New York, a federal jury Tuesday convicted New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez of corruption on all 16 counts he faced. The disgraced Democrat, once head of the powerful Senate Foreign Relations Committee, was found guilty of bribery, wire fraud, extortion, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and acting as a foreign agent for Egypt. This is prosecutor Damian Williams speaking after yesterday's verdict.
This case has always been about shocking levels of corruption. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes in the form of cash, gold bars, a Mercedes-Benz. This wasn't politics as usual, this was politics for profit. And now that a jury has convicted Bob Menendez, his years of selling his office to the highest bidder have finally come to an end.
2 Menendez associates, New Jersey businessmen Wael Hanna and Fred Davies, were also found guilty on all counts. Senator Menendez's wife, Nadine Menendez, was also charged in the corruption schemes, but has not yet been tried. Senator Menendez faces years in prison when he's sentenced in October. 8 of his convictions carry possible 20-year sentences. Democrats are calling on Menendez to resign, which would allow New Jersey's Democratic Governor Phil Murphy to fill his vacant seat. If Menendez refuses to resign, he could face expulsion by his fellow senators. Here in Milwaukee, activists and community members gathered in the streets to condemn the police killing Tuesday of 43-year-old Milwaukee resident Samuel Sharp. The officers who killed Sharp, an unhoused black veteran, are from Ohio and are in Wisconsin as part of a group of 4,500 law enforcement officials in Milwaukee for the RNC. But the shooting took place a mile from the RNC's proceedings. Sharp appeared to be in the middle of an altercation with another man when the police officers charged towards him before fatally shooting him. Separately, community members on Tuesday rallied outside Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm's house, demanding justice for Devontae Mitchell, the 43-year-old black father who was killed by security guards last month when they pinned Mitchell to the ground outside the Hyatt Regency Hotel in downtown Milwaukee. We'll have more on these stories later in the broadcast. In more news from Milwaukee, anti-immigrant hate speech and misinformation about the U.S.-Mexico border took center stage on the second day of the Republican National Convention. Several of Donald Trump's former rivals took to the stage, including former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Texas Senator Ted Cruz, and Vivek Ramaswamy. Many lashed out at Vice President Kamala Harris, saying she and Biden have enforced open border policies that have led to a wave of what Trump's campaign describes as a migrant crime epidemic. There's no data linking immigrants to rising crime. Meanwhile, Senator Cruz falsely claimed immigrants kill U.S. citizens every damn day, he said, while many remarks scapegoated asylum seekers for the smuggling of fentanyl across the southern border. Evidence shows fentanyl is largely smuggled by U.S. citizens across U.S. ports of entry. We'll have more on the RNC after headlines. California Congressmember Adam Schiff warned donors Democrats would lose the presidency, control of the Senate, and miss out on the chance to reclaim the House unless President Biden steps aside. Adam Schiff, who's running for California's U.S. Senate seat in November, made the comments during a private fundraising dinner in New York, according to new reports. Despite mounting fears over Biden's ability to beat Trump, Democrats appear to be moving ahead with plans to hold a virtual vote confirming Biden as their nominee weeks before the DNC. We'll have more on that at democracynow.org. In housing news, President Biden has unveiled a plan to limit annual rent increases to more than 5%, to no more than 5%. Landlords who fail to comply would lose their tax benefits. The rule would apply to corporate landlords who control at least 50 units, which amounts to roughly half the rental market, or 20 million units nationwide. Democrats would likely need to control Congress in order for the proposal to pass. Biden outlined the plan during a speech before the NAACP Tuesday, but mistakenly said he was capping rent increases at $55 instead of 5%.
The idea that corporate-owned housing is able to raise your rent $300-400 a month or something, under what I'm about to announce, they can't raise it more than $55.
Progressive Texas Congressmember Greg Casar has challenged his Republican counterparts to prove their commitment to workers by backing union-boosting legislation. In a social media post, Casar wrote, quote, "If Republicans want to talk like they're pro-worker, then let's have a vote on the PRO Act next week. Let's see which politicians are for unions and which ones are all talk," he said. This comes as Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance attempts to court working-class voters, and after Teamster President Sean O'Brien addressed the RNC Monday. Other union leaders, meanwhile, are warning voters not to succumb to fake worker appeals by the Republican Party. AFL-CIO President Liz Shuler said, quote, "A Trump-Vance White House is a corporate CEO's dream and a worker's nightmare," she said, while CEIU President April Verrett warned, quote, "Vance's loyalties lie with the Wall Street bankers and Silicon Valley billionaires who've bankrolled his political career," unquote. In Kenya, at least one person was killed in a fresh wave of youth-led anti-government protests demanding President William Ruto resign. At least 50 people have been killed since protests broke out last month in response to a now-withdrawn tax bill. This is a protester in Mombasa.
We're still protesting because Ruto could have easily resolved this from the first week. He would have signed off his people from the first week. He would have stepped down from the first week. But he's waited this long. All these people have died, all this life loss, and still he cannot see the bigger impact he's creating on the country.
In other news from Kenya, hundreds more national police officers were deployed to Haiti this week as part of a UN-backed security mission. Federal prosecutors have started to offer new plea deals and drop more serious charges against January 6th insurrectionists following last month's Supreme Court ruling that limited the use of felony obstruction of Congress charges against a rioter. Those expected to benefit include members of the extreme right, Oath Keepers, and Proud Boys. Over 250 January 6 defendants could seek to vacate their obstruction convictions or charges. Many of them, however, were also charged with other felonies. And in other Supreme Court news, President Biden's reportedly preparing to endorse major changes to the nation's highest court, including establishing term limits and an enforceable code of ethics. Biden is also reportedly considering a call for a constitutional amendment that would eliminate broad immunity for presidents and other officials. As Sudan's warring parties continue to fight for control, UNICEF reports some 50,000 people have fled and sought refuge in the eastern region of Khartoum, with many more expected to arrive in the coming days as they escape the violence. This is UNICEF Program Coordinator Nasra Islan.
So far, 400 children have been registered here, of which they are receiving several services, including mental and psychosocial support, as we have seen many of the children and families are missing their loved ones here.
In Bangladesh, at least 6 people have been killed in a wave of student protests over government quotas on public sector jobs. Up to 30% of those positions are reserved for the relatives of soldiers who fought in Bangladesh's independence war against Pakistan in 1971. Critics say the quota unfairly benefits families who support Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. A number of government jobs are also designated for women, ethnic minorities, and disabled job applicants, but those are not included in protesters' grievances. Schools and universities across Bangladesh have shut down amidst the growing unrest. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has accepted Prime Minister Gabriel Attal's resignation as the government steps down after suffering a major defeat in snap elections Macron called earlier this month. But Attal will stay on as caretaker amidst ongoing uncertainty over a new government. A leftist coalition, which came together just days ahead of the July 7th parliamentary election, pulled off a surprise victory and a blow to both the far right and Macron. But the alliance did not secure an outright majority and has since not been able to agree on a candidate for prime minister. Macron, meanwhile, has called on centrist parties to form a ruling coalition. In other news from France, police continue to forcibly remove undocumented immigrants around Paris ahead of the Summer Olympics, which kick off next week. This is Jocelyn, an unhoused Congolese mother.
I have 2 children, and because we're living on the streets, one fell ill with asthma, so it's very difficult for me with the Olympic Games. We do all of our activities in Paris. What will become of us now? Can anybody find a solution for us?
In more Olympics news, Amnesty International has slammed French authorities over its policy banning its Muslim athletes from wearing headscarves. The group said, quote, banning French athletes from competing with sports hijabs at the Olympic and Paralympic Games makes a mockery of claims that Paris 2024 is the first gender-equal Olympics and lays bare the racist gender discrimination that underpins access to sport in France, Amnesty International said. And a new U.S. Senate report finds Amazon Prime Day results in a massive spike in warehouse worker injuries. An investigation by Senator Bernie Sanders' Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee found Amazon Prime Day in 2019 led to a whopping 45% of Amazon warehouse workers sustaining injuries. Bernie Sanders said of the findings, quote, Amazon may be a $2 trillion corporation. Its owner, Jeff Bezos, may be worth $215 billion, but that does not give them the right to put their $36 billion in annual profits ahead of the health and safety of their workers. This type of corporate greed must end, Senator Sanders said. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, War, Peace, and the Presidency, breaking with convention.